Hey guys, welcome to today's video. Today I want to take a look at Turborepo and using it to build sort of like a Nuxt agency type repo where you'll be able to create UI components that are reusable in different apps, and you can add multiple Nuxt apps and they all use this dependency and make it easily deployable on Vue3. So let's have a look and dive right in. So firstly, to get started, let's use Turborepo to create a project. And what Turborepo is, it's just basically a monorepo setup where you can add a bunch of packages and apps and have them all depend on each other quite smoothly, and easily set up deploy flows for them to run and build and deploy each on their own. So let's make a directory called Nuxt agency, which would be like a agencies controlling repo. And the way you can imagine this flow that I'm doing now is kind of like setting up you're running a web agency and you have components that you reuse in a bunch of applications, and these applications aren't a single instance of, let's say, Nuxt, but you actually have multiple Nuxt apps running. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up Turbo with a command called npx create, and then create turbo, and then add latest, and this will set up the repo for you. So where would you like to create your repo? In the current folder with a dot, and I will use yarn to install my dependencies, and then it'll by default create the app/web, app/docs, packages UI, packages ESLint config custom, and packages tsconfig to share a TypeScript config. Now that the Turbo repo has been initted, we can open this up in code and have a little look at what's going on. And I just have to install the new VS Code server for Linux. So once this is finished, I'll be right back. Alright, so once you create your Turbo package, you'll have a file structure that looks like this. So let's look at what's going on and maybe do some tweaks to get it to run. So currently we have a turbo.json, which gives us like these pipeline options where you define your build steps and what everything depends on and how it outputs. And then in your packages, these are shared packages that would build on run basically when this build runs, and all your packages or all your apps can import these packages. So you can see we have a ESLint config that everything shares, and we have an apps folder that has a docs folder, which by default comes with Next, but we'll delete that, and then a web folder, which also is a Next app. So let's clean up this a little bit and customize it so that it is Nuxt friendly. So something that I want to keep is the, I don't want to keep the tsconfig because this is mostly set for React. So I'm going to delete that. And then for ESLint config custom, I will keep that. Actually, we'll skip ESLint on this example, but so I'll just delete that, and we'll just keep the UI package. UI has a tsconfig.json, and we don't need any of these. So for now, let's delete that until we actually need it. And we can delete node modules up to these React components. And package.json, let's give it a namespace. We can say at Nuxt, no, let's say at agency/UI, and we can remove this ESLint dependency, or all these dependencies actually. We might keep TypeScript. No, we can remove TypeScript for now. Just save that. And for linting, we can remove that script. We can also do a, I'm just going to delete these two modules as well. I mean, these two apps. because we want to set that up ourselves. And then in the main package.json, we can remove ESLint config custom. We can keep prettier, and we can keep turbo, and we keep the workspaces as apps and packages, and we can keep that we can remove this lint command because we aren't linting anymore. So now we have an empty UI package with a package.json without any dependencies, and we'll change this from index.tsx in the main. We'll do a /nuxt.mjs, and there's no types, so we'll remove those types, and then we'll just create that file, which we'll leave empty for now. And then in apps, we'll generate a Nuxt app. So let's go to apps, and then we'll do a npx Nuxt3 init, and then we'll say web app. Now you can see that it's created a new folder called web app with all the Nuxt stuff in it. And then in this package.json, I'm going to define another script called prepare, and all this is going to do is run Nuxt prepare so that types get generated. And we can create another project in apps, and we can say npx Nuxt3 init web app 2. So basically this is two different Nuxt instances, and you can all manage them all in the same repo, and we're going to share this UI package between all of them. So let's go to the package.json in this one and add prepare as well, and do Nuxt prepare. And so basically there's a build command, there's a dev command, generate, and everything. So let's say app number 2 is a static app. So let's change this build command and do Nuxt generate. And this is going to generate a static app instead of a server-side app. And this is in web app 2. So now we can just close all these down. And just for fun, I'm going to show you how to add a unit testing setup to the packages UI. Because if you test your core UI components, then you probably need less testing in your apps themselves. So let's go back to the base repository. And the way you add dependencies to workspaces is you can do yarn workspace add -d, and we'll add Vitest for testing. We'll do add Vitejs plugin view, and we'll use this version that I'm about to enter. So at 2.3.3 because I've had some issues with the other versions. And we'll also add JS DOM for testing, and the other thing we need is probably C8 for coverage, and I think that might be it for now. So let's add those along. Oh, we need to define the workspace. So let's go change these workspace names for web app, because currently it's just, it has no name, so it needs a name. So we'll do can I type? So we'll do at and this has to be named at what do we call this, agency/web app, and we'll do the same for web app number 2, which will be name, and this will be at agency/web app 2, and save that. So now we have 3 package.jsons that are being managed by Turbo. So let's close all these down, and then we can yarn workspace add to at the workspace add agency/UI, because that's where we want to do the testing, and let that run. And we need versions in our package.json as well. So let's just add these versions, and we can do the same for web app 2. and close that down. Okay, so now we've added this. So let's just make sure everything runs by checking there's dev commands. And then what we want to do is we want different ports for the two apps because they can't run on the same port. So the way we do that is in web app, we can go to dev and just set port equals to 3000 in this one. And then in web app 2, package.json, we can do port equals 3001, Nuxt dev. And then we should be able to run dev because our UI package doesn't have a dev command. It won't be run by Turbo. So let's just go to Turbo and check out the config. So we have a dev and it's cache false. And what we can do is say that when dev, we can say it depends on this caret means anything that it has dependencies of needs to be built first. But the package, the UI package doesn't have a build step. But if you were say to have a TypeScript package over here that needs a building step, you'll add this. And if you remove this, that means that if before you run dev, run build in the same thing that's running dev as well, so that you can prepare your repo. So that's just a little info on that. But I think running dev just like this should be fine. So let's have a look. So now we can do yarn run dev, and what that's going to run is in the main package.json, it's going to run this dev, turbo run dev parallel, which means it runs all the applications in parallel. So let's see. Oh, we first need to, so if you look at the error, you can see that command failed with one. So Nuxt permission denied, and the reason that is because we need to install dependencies, and we don't have to cd into every single app. We can just do yarn install, and it'll install the dependencies of every package that has missing dependencies and node modules. So now the node modules have been installed. So if you look at apps, web app, and you look inside node modules, you'll see that it only has the binary things installed. And web app 2 also only has the binary things installed. That's because the main node modules, everything is in there, in the main package. I mean, in the main folder structure, root folder. And what that allows is for these packages and apps to use like linking to resolve the modules. So now that everything's installed, we should be able to run yarn dev, which runs turbo everything in parallel, and you can see that it's starting the Nuxt command. So now you'll see it prints out the package name and then the logs that came from the package name, the logs that came out from there. So now we have these two apps running, and if I click on 3000, you'll see that this is the web app 1, which is a server generated app. So we can inspect that or view page source, and you can see that yeah, so this is not formatted, but you can see that the app runs obviously. And then let's check 3001. And if we inspect this, we should be able to see some. So 3001 is the static site. So if I do reload, it gets the, oh, but this is obviously in dev mode, so it's not being generated. It's just being served with dev mode. So the way we can inspect this is by doing a test run of yarn build. And I can see that it's trying to hit a cache, which we won't get into this video, but you can set up Turborepo to use caches as well to make it a little bit faster every time. So now you can see it's running build in 3 packages, but it won't be able to build the UI because UI doesn't have a build step. So now we can go to the apps web app 1, and you'll see that there's an output folder, and this is the server side one. So now you can see public server, and in web app 2 you can see output as public server, but server is empty because it's a static HTML site. So that's how you can run build and dev. So now let's get into the sort of meat of this, which is writing reusable UI packages. So first of all, we installed all these test packages, which we'll use once we get once we have an actual UI component, which will create a button. So we'll create a new file, or we'll create a new folder and file called components/button.vue. And the way you want to write these components is with a lot of different options and reusability. Because imagine that this button component is going to be used all over your different sites and apps, and this could be any type of component. So you don't really want to do a lot of state management in this, but mostly props and emits and stuff. So let's create a Nuxt component in here. And what we'll do first is we'll add the button, and then let's give it some styling, and we'll scope the styling to this button. So we'll do button, and then let's give it some padding of 1 rem, and we can do a border of none or 0. I mean none, and a background color of, let's say, aquamarine, and a color of black, and its own font family of sans serif. So this is the styling of our cool button. And if we do button, we can do, so you don't want to say like add or save or anything. Yeah, what you want to do is you want to give it slots, and this is a default slot that it will accept. So anything you put inside the component usage, then that will render in here. And we'll give it some props for some modifications. So the way we do that in Nuxt3 is say define props and give it the types and call this as a function. So let's say we want to have a disabled prop, which is a boolean, but it's also optional. So what we can do then is say that disabled equals disabled. And we can also do something like emits, define emits. And this takes the sort of same syntax for TypeScript. And then what we want to do is define a function, and we'll give it a custom event. So let's say click my button, and this will emit a message or a string called, so let's just do value string, and it returns void. This is just to tell the engine what is expected from this. So what we can do over here is say at click, we want to do $emit, and the emit will take, sorry, I had a call. Okay, so in the click listener, we can define this emit, and the emit takes the event type, which we've defined as click my button. So once we do that, we can say click my button, and we want to give it a string value. So let's say hello from button. And that's going to be it for our super cool component. So it's basically just a button that has a emit. When on click, it also emits a click my button event. And before even importing this, I want to show you how we can unit test this so that we know that every single package that uses it can expect the same type of results. Let me just format this a little bit. Okay, so the way we can unit test this is firstly by going to package UI, and then we create a new vitest.config.ts, and then we'll import define config from vitest config, and then we'll export default that as a function which accepts an object. And the first property we're going to change is the test property to tell it where to run our tests. So I'm going to include files with this naming convention, so tests and then slash /test.ts. So any file matching that would be tested. So we can also define a few other options here, which is necessary to be able to use Vue. So first of all, we want to import Vue, the Vue plugin from @vitejs/plugin Vue. And then we can do plugins and do Vue. And you'll see a squiggly line over here, but I found that this can just be fixed with @ts-ignore. I've tried to search for the error there, and it's something to do with the Vite version and the plugin shape, but it still does work. Okay, so the other things that we do need is globals true, and we also need to set the environment to JS-DOM so that it knows that it's running in sort of a browser type environment. And for kicks, we can just do like a reporters verbose so that we see a little bit more things. And that'll be it. So have we installed, so there's another dependency that we need to install, so we can just close this off for now. And we'll do yarn workspace add, and first of all @agency/UI add development dependency that is called @vue/test-utils. And while that installs, we can close this down, and you'll see that it adds Vue test-utils, and then we can create a tests folder over here. Oops, we need to do tests and then give it a test. So let's do button.test.ts. Okay, let's just do all that over again. So we can do new folder, tests, and then add a file called button.test.ts. So we do have that button defined in our components, and we want to test a few things like these props and the maybe the classes. So let's give it a class. So let's say class equals btn, and then we can do .btn over here. All right. So in our tests, what we want to do is, first of all, we want to add the test script to this. So we'll do test and then do vitest run --config, and that's called vitest.config.ts. And you can probably create a package that shares this config as well and share it between all your packages, but that's up to you. And then we'll run coverage as well. All right, so if we run test, that should run the test file. So let's do yarn test and see what happens. Oh, we have not defined a test script, so we can do test and then turbo run test in the main package.json, and we need a comma. So let's try that again, and it will probably fail because we have no tests, but let's see what happens. Oh, and we also need to add it to the pipeline in Turborepo, in the turbo.json. So let's do test, and probably you could do depends on, but we have nothing that it really depends on, so all we'll have to do is just say cache false, because we don't want to cache the test stuff. So now we can try on test again, and now you can see it's running in UI test because it picked up that it has a test script, and it's failing, but it's saying that we have no test suites. So we have to create a test suite. So let's go to button.test, and then what we'll do is import the describe, it, and expect from Vitest, and we'll also import mount from @view test-utils, and I think we also need to import the component, right? So import button from component/button.view. And for this to work, so it's giving us an error that it's not a module, but all we can do is just go in UI and create a new file called view.shim.d.ts, and then we can say declare module star.view. Something like that, and then you'll see this works. So first let's do a describe, and we'll say UI button, and then in the UI button what we want to do is first set up a it block, and we'll say it renders the button, and what we can do is we can say const wrapper equals mount the button component, and then expect wrapper dot to be defined. So now we have one test, and we can do yarn test again. And by the way, if you have tests in all your other packages, they will also run when you run yarn test. So that test passed because it is defined, but that's not a very specific test, so we can do some more. But I also just want to show you, if you want to run, let's say, only a single file in your main package.json, what you can do is, like, if you say test UI, you can do turbo, you can basically, you can do turbo run test, and then with dash filter equals, and then the package name, so @agency/UI. And then if I run this now, so yarn test UI, then it should only run the agency UI tests. And this is helpful if you don't want to run a full test suite on all your packages, but just a specific package. Okay, so we have a passing test, and let me just show you some more things I like to test before we actually create this component, this module that we'll import into our other projects. All right, so in the tests, we can do it allows a disable prop, or let's just say it can be disabled with a prop. So we can do the same thing, const wrapper equals mount the button, and then we'll say we'll have to give it the props. So this is in options, so we can do props, and then we'll do disabled is true. And then the way we test this is by saying const, let's do expect wrapper .html, which is a function to contain. So we know that the HTML should look something like this now. So button disabled equals true. So that's what we want to expect in a string of the HTML. And another way we can do that probably is by saying const button equals wrapper dot find, and we'll give it the button, and then we can say expect button dot element dot disabled dot to be true. So this is the actual element, the attribute on the element. This is not the prop. So now we can do this and do yarn test UI. And you can see that we have an issue. Expected button class button disabled. So now you can see that the disabled has an a empty string. So I think we can remove that test because all we really care about is that the button is disabled. So let's remove this test and just say that we expect the button to be disabled. And there you go. So you can see renders the button, can be disabled with a prop. And what else do we want to test? Maybe one more test and then we'll get to, oh, so we can check that it emits hello from button. So let's do the same thing again. So we'll do it emits the correct text when clicked. And we can say that this again, the button. And then what we want to do is click the button. So we can say wrapper dot trigger, or let's say wrapper dot find. So let's find the button. The button, and then let's say button dot trigger a click event, and then we can say expect button dot emitted, or let's say wrapper dot emitted so this returns a record of string. So let's first, we have to get the value. So we gave it a custom emit, so click my button. So basically we're testing that as well. So click my button, and this returns an array of arrays. And the way I know that is just because I've done this before. So to be the text, so hello from button. And the way we get around this is because this doesn't have a type, so let's just give it as array of string. That's a little bit annoying, but you know, TypeScript's gonna TypeScript. Okay, so this is a little bit long. Okay, so that's what we expect to be emitted from the button, and let's run the tests again. And you can see that it emits the correct value. So now we know that this button is fully unit tested, and we can probably check that the class list has the button or the style list has this to make sure that it's rendering correctly. But that gives you a good idea of how to test your UI components. Next up, I'll show you how to use them in your different apps. So in Web App 1, first of all, actually, we need to go to the UI package and set it up as a Nuxt component. So the way you do this with Nuxt is pretty simple. So we need a few dependencies. So join and dir name from, oops. And we didn't install these dependencies directly, but they do exist. So you can see that it has path installed, which will be defined. So you don't need to install them separately. And then we need to do define Nuxt module. And this we actually do need to install the dependency that we will use now. So this is called from @nuxt/kit. It seems like it's resolving it, so let's try without it. And then import file URL to path from URL. So these are all the dependents we need to create a Nuxt module, which is like a UI library sort of. And then let's define a function, which I'm just going to copy for now, which converts because this is an MJS, so it doesn't have dir name, and we just want to define directory name as this import.meta.url stuff, just to make life a little bit simpler on ourselves. And then we just want to export default the define Nuxt module, and this is also an object which has a hooks, and this hook that we want to run is called components dir, and you can see the auto suggest for us, and this is a function which takes directories, and then all we want to do is say directories.push the path. We want to use the join function, and then dir name which we defined, and components. And then for fun, we'll prefix this with our agency tag. And this is all we need to be able to write a Nuxt module for component sharing. So now that we have that, we have to make sure that, okay, so our main file is nuxt.mjs, and that should be fine. And we can go back to, just gonna make this a little bit bigger. We can go back to web app and we can go to nuxt.config, but first of all we need to install this dependency. So I'm going to add this as @agency/UI, and then the thing you want to use for the version is just this, and we'll do the same thing for the app number 2 in the package.json, and then that should have it. And now all we need to do is just run yarn install again to make sure everything's linked. All right, so that looks like it installed. And then let's do for web app number 1 in nuxt.config.ts. We can do modules and simply add our agency/UI. That's all we have to do, and we can do the same thing for web app 2. Oops. Agency UI, and then in the web app, let's delete the Nuxt welcome, and then now this will be a global thing. So now we can do agency button, and in web app 2, and if we activate Volar, because this is using Vue3 still, so let me actually show you that. So let's do Volar instead of Vue3, I don't know how to say that. So enable that for the workspace. If I start typing agency, I should probably deactivate Vue3 as well. So now I can see Volar is activated, and then if I do agency button, not sure why that isn't working, but if you get your type set up correctly, I think that's just mostly a type thing. Maybe I need to run yarn prepare. We need to add that as a global command in package.json. And then all we have to do is turbo run prepare. Let's try that again. Oh, and we need to add it to the pipeline as well. Prepare cache false, and hopefully now it's preparing the types for Nuxt. So you can see that it generated the types, and if we go to the web app now, There you go. So now we get the global components that was generated in Nuxt. And this will tell you with autocomplete that it has a disabled property that we can use. And we can also do @ and then it will show you that we have click my button, which is awesome. So let's just render it like this without doing anything to it by running yarn dev. Opening up the app. And there you can see our button. It's hilariously gross. But what we can do, obviously there's no content in it, but we've added this padding and everything. So what we can do is just say it shouldn't be a self-closing tag because it has a slot. And by the way, we can test slots as well. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So click me. And then that auto updated, but it was off screen. So even though the package is in a different file or as a dependency, once you edit this file, then it will update. So that's pretty cool. So what happened to the app now? So now you have click me, and this is our shared button. So let's go to localhost 3001. And you can see that the button is there without the click me because it's shared. So let's do click me 2 in web app 2. And I believe we need to reset this one, yeah. So now we have click me 2. And if we do an add click my button, let's do log. Oh, I'll just add click. I guess we can test this. So add click my button. We have to create a script. Call this setup. And const log equals a function. So this will log the value that we gave as the emit. So all we have to call is log and it will automatically pass the test. Let's do alert so that we can see it on the screen. And this is in web app 2, so let's refresh this. Click hello from button, and this is being passed all the way from the dependency and not in this app. So pretty cool stuff. Last thing I want to show you is maybe how to test for slots. So in the button we can do it, and we're getting some sort of error over here. And I'm not sure why this is happening again. Okay, anyway. So now we can do it accepts a default slot. And then basically just the same stuff again. Const wrapper equals mount button, but this time we want to mount it with slots and give it a default and just give it a HTML string saying click me with 3 exclamation marks. And then what we can do is just say expect wrapper.html.to contain the text that we've added. And let's run tests so we can close this down. And there we go. Accepts the default slot is now tested. So yeah, that is how you'll create a reusable UI package, and basically anything. This doesn't have to be a UI package, but anything that you want to share with a bunch of different apps and stuff. And you can think how this could be useful in an agency type setup. That's why I'm using that example. But even if you had shared configs, even if you had any kind of, even if you built your own little npm module that you just want to share between these apps, you can directly share it. If you have an entities folder that does all your core business logic, that can be shared between apps and stuff. So that's pretty great. And deploying on Vercel is pretty easy, but I think I'm going to skip that step for now. And you guys let me know if you want to see how to deploy this to Vercel, because it's quite simple, but it's quite a bit to set up. So if you want to see that, let me know. And if you did enjoy this video, remember to leave a like or subscribe. And thank you so much. I think by this time the video is out, we should be on 2,000 subscribers. Hopefully, I'm not sure. Let's have a look. So let's do kaizencodes.dev/statistics. I don't want to break. I should spell this right. Oh, we're 10 subscribers away. Okay, so if 10 of you hit the subscribe button, we should be at 2,000. And then I can do a special release. Let me know if you want to see something like that. And hope you guys have a great day and that you enjoyed the video. Until next time.